My name is Alyssa Morgan. I'm 29 years old, a real estate agent in Charleston, South Carolina. And if I had to sum myself up in one word, it would be resilient. Life's storms knocked me down more than once, but I always found a way to rise, again. My stepmother humiliated me at dinner, mocking me, belittling me in front of everyone. She thought I was powerless, that I had nothing. But what she didn't know was that I had a secret mansion that would leave them all stunned. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Has someone ever tried to tear you down just to feel bigger? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever had a family member betray you. Growing up, I wasn't the kind of girl who dreamed of luxury. My father raised me with simple values: honesty, hard work, and loyalty. He was a carpenter, hands always. Calloused, the smell of sawdust following him like a second skin. He used to say, "Alyssa, the world can strip you of almost everything, but never your grit." And grit was something I learned early. My mother passed away when I was 10, leaving just Dad and me in our little Charleston home. We weren't rich, but he made sure I felt secure, loved, and never alone. But all that changed when my father remarried. Her name was Karen. She swept into our lives with her perfect hair, expensive perfume, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was younger than my father by a good 15 years, and from the very beginning, I knew she didn't see me as family. At first, she hid it well. She'd make small talk, bring me gifts that felt more like bribes than affection, and call me sweetheart in that fake sugary tone. But when my father wasn't around, her mask slipped. "You'll never be good enough for him," she whispered once when I was still a teenager, her voice sharp as glass. "You're just a reminder of the woman he loved before me." I was too young, too stunned to reply. Instead, I swallowed the hurt, just like I always did. Despite her cruelty, I tried to make it work, for my father's sake. He adored her. She made him feel young again, and I didn't want to ruin that. But Karen knew how to play her role. In front of Dad, she was attentive, doting, the picture of a perfect wife. Behind closed doors, she treated me like an inconvenience, a shadow. Family dinners became torture. She'd make sly comments about my clothes, my weight, even my career choices. Once, when I announced I wanted to study real estate, she smirked across the table and said, "Sweetheart, do you really think you have the charisma to sell houses? Some people just aren't cut out for big dreams." Dad laughed it off, thinking it was a joke, but I saw the malice in her eyes. The cruelest twist of all was watching my father's health fade. By the time I was in my late 20s, his heart had weakened, and every day with him felt fragile, borrowed. Karen, of course, played the grieving wife in public. But in private, she complained about the doctor's bills, about how much work it was to care for him. One night I overheard her on the phone, her voice low and annoyed. "God, if this drags on much longer, I'll have nothing left to enjoy. He needs to get his affairs in order already." My chest turned to ice. That was the moment I realized Karen wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous. The night that would change everything started like any other family dinner. Karen insisted on hosting at a fancy restaurant downtown. She invited relatives, friends, and even some of my father's old business partners. I should have known it was a setup. As soon as I arrived, Karen's eyes flicked over me, her lips curving into a cruel smile. "Darling," she said loudly, so everyone could hear, "you wore that? How brave of you." A few people chuckled nervously. My cheeks burned, but I forced a smile and took my seat. Throughout the night, she picked at me. Every word, every glance was a dagger disguised as casual conversation. "So, Alyssa," she cooed, swirling her wine, "still selling those little starter homes? How quaint. Maybe one day you'll close a deal on something real." The table laughed, some uncomfortably, others openly. My father stayed silent, too weak to intervene. I felt the familiar sting of humiliation, the same ache I'd carried for years. But this time, I wasn't the girl who swallowed her pain. Because what Karen didn't know was that I had a secret. A truth so stunning it would silence her smirk forever. And when the moment came, I was going to make sure every single person at that table saw who really held the power. But before I could expose her, she had to push me even further. When I was little, home was more than just four walls. It was Dad whistling off-key while sanding wood in his shop. It was Mom humming to herself while folding laundry. It was Friday pizza nights and lazy Sundays when we'd all pile onto the couch for old movies. After Mom died, those traditions became even more precious. Dad and I clung to them like lifelines. Saturday mornings meant pancakes in the kitchen, with me mixing batter while he teased me about adding too many chocolate chips. On my birthdays, he'd build me something handmade: a jewelry box, a bookshelf, a hope chest. We didn't have much money, but I never felt poor. What we had was love. And I thought that was enough. Karen changed everything. She swept in with her designer bags and manicured nails, her perfume filling every room before she even spoke. Dad was smitten. I wanted to be happy for him. After all, he deserved joy after years of grief. But something in me didn't trust her. Maybe it was the way she looked around our modest home, lips pursed, as though she was calculating how much it was worth. Maybe it was the way her laughter never seemed to reach her eyes. At first, I told myself I was just being protective. I was afraid of someone replacing my mother. But the more time passed, the harder it became to ignore the truth. Karen didn't love my father. She loved what he could give her. Slowly, our little traditions vanished. Saturday pancakes turned into rushed brunches at expensive restaurants Karen insisted on. Handmade birthday gifts were replaced with things she chose, expensive but impersonal. Even Christmas changed. Where Mom and I once decorated the tree together, carefully hanging each ornament with a story, Karen preferred to hire a decorator. "It looks more polished this way," she'd say with a smile that made my stomach turn. Dad didn't fight her. He wanted peace. And I swallowed my protests, telling myself it was just different, not worse. But deep down, I missed the home I once had. Karen loved to host. Lavish dinners, cocktail parties, charity events. Our home became a stage for her to shine. I learned quickly that these weren't about family. They were about appearances. I'd sit at the table while she charmed Dad's friends, laughing too loudly at their jokes, hanging on their every word. She always made sure to position herself as the perfect wife. And when the spotlight shifted, off her, she'd find ways to cut me down, subtly, cruelly. "Alyssa's studying real estate," she once announced with a sweet smile. "Isn't that adorable? She wants to sell homes. Like lemonade stands for grown-ups." The room chuckled. I felt my cheeks burn. Dad patted my hand under the table, whispering, "Don't mind her." But I did. I minded more than I let on. The time I graduated and started my career, the cracks in our family were clear. Dad still believed in Karen's act, but I'd seen behind the curtain too many times. She'd talk about his assets as though she was already planning her inheritance. She'd complain to friends about his health, lowering her voice when she thought I couldn't hear. "If he doesn't take care of himself, I'll be stuck with the bills." Can you imagine? I wanted to confront her, to scream, but I kept my silence. For Dad. It wasn't until his health truly began to decline that I realized silence can be the sharpest knife of all. When Karen invited everyone to that restaurant, the night she would humiliate me in front of family and friends, I had a bad feeling. She'd been circling me for weeks, her comments sharper, her patience thinner. She saw me working hard in real estate, closing small deals, saving little by little. I think she sensed that I was building something of my own, something she couldn't control, and Karen hated not being in control. The night of the dinner, As I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my dress, my stomach knotted. I told myself it was just nerves that I was overthinking, but in my gut, I knew she was planning something to put me in my place once and for all. I didn't know what Karen would say that night. I didn't know how cruel she would be, how far she'd go to cut me down. All I knew was this: whatever happened, I wouldn't leave that table the same woman who sat down, and when the moment came, I would remember every single word she said. I wish I could say Karen's cruelty was sudden, but it wasn't. It grew like a weed, small at first, almost invisible, until one day it had wrapped itself around everything. It started with words. Then it became something darker. One afternoon, I stopped by Dad's house after a long day, at work. He was resting upstairs, his health fragile, and I headed to the kitchen to make him soup. Karen was there, swirling wine in a crystal glass. She looked me up and down, her smile sharp. "Well, if it isn't the little realtor," she said. "How many starter homes did you sell this week? 1? 2? I forced a smile. "Actually, I closed on a 3-bedroom yesterday." Her smirk widened. "How quaint. Meanwhile, your father and I are looking at properties on the waterfront. Real homes. But don't worry, you can visit sometime." The words stung, but I kept stirring the pot, silent. At dinner that evening, Dad asked how work was going. Before I could answer, Karen chimed in. "She's doing her best," she said sweetly. "But you know how it is, Tom. Real estate is cutthroat. Some people just don't shine in that kind of business." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Dad frowned. "She's tougher than you think, Karen." Her lips twitched, but she said nothing more. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. She wanted to diminish me, not just in private, but in front of him too. The next week, I found her in Dad's study, rifling through his papers. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She turned slowly, her expression calm. "Looking for some insurance policies. Nothing to concern yourself with." Her tone sent a chill through me. I stepped closer. "Dad asked me to handle those documents." She cut me off, eyes flashing. "You think you're entitled to everything just because you're his daughter? Let me be clear, Alyssa. This house, his assets, his life, none of it belongs to you anymore. It's mine now." My breath caught. "He's still alive, Karen. He's still here." She smiled coldly. "For now." I wanted to tell Dad to expose her venom, but he was already so weak. The thought of adding more stress to his heart felt cruel. So I stayed silent. But silence didn't protect me. At a small family gathering, Karen raised her glass, her eyes glittering. "To Alyssa. May she one day sell something bigger than a townhouse." The table chuckled awkwardly. My cousin whispered, "Ignore her." But how could I? Every word chipped away at me. Then came the night she cornered me in the hallway. Her voice was low, silky. "Alyssa, I know things have been strained between us, but I have an idea. There's a property Daniel, one of your father's friends, is interested in. I could put in a good word. He's very generous with women who show him attention." I froze. Are you trying to set me up?" Karen smirked, brushing past me. "Don't act so shocked. Opportunities don't fall in your lap every day. Maybe try saying thank you for once." My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, but her perfume lingered in the air, suffocating me. That night, as I lay awake, I couldn't shake her words. She wasn't just mocking me anymore. She was pushing me toward something darker. And deep down, I wondered, was this just cruelty? Or was she setting me up for something I couldn't see yet? I didn't know it then. But the dinner to come would answer that question in the cruelest way possible. The night of the dinner, the air already felt charged. I walked into the restaurant, my heels clicking against marble floors, the smell of garlic and wine clinging to the air. Karen had chosen the place, of course. Fancy, expensive, and designed for spectacle. Relatives filled the long table, along with a few of Dad's old business partners. Laughter echoed, silverware clinked, and glasses sparkled under the soft chandeliers. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen would keep her venom to herself. But Karen never wasted an audience. She greeted me with a smile too wide, a hug that was all sharp perfume and cold arms. "Alyssa," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "so glad you could make it. I was worried you'd be too busy with whatever it is you're doing these days." A few chuckles rippled around the table. My cheeks flushed, but I forced a smile and sat down beside Dad. Karen positioned herself at the head of the table, glowing in a silk dress, playing the role of perfect hostess. She poured wine, cracked jokes, and charmed every guest. I could almost forget the way her eyes lingered on me, waiting for her chance. Halfway through dinner, the conversation turned to careers. My cousin bragged about her promotion. One of Dad's friends talked about his son's law firm. Then Karen's eyes gleamed. She set down her glass and said loudly, "And what about Alyssa? Still selling those little starter homes?" The table quieted. Everyone turned to look at me. I cleared my throat. "Actually, I've been doing well. Closed 3 sales this month." Karen's lips curled into a smirk. 3 sales? How impressive." She tilted her head. "Tell me, darling, do those commissions even cover your rent? Or are you still living in that, what do you call it, cozy little apartment?" A few people snickered. My chest burned. I tried to laugh it off, but Karen wasn't finished. "You know," she continued, her voice carrying across the table, "real estate is a tough business. Takes charm, connections, the right look. Not everyone has what it takes. Some people—" She glanced at me, her smile sharp as a knife. "Some people should know when to give up." The room chuckled nervously. My cousin's husband whispered something that made him laugh harder. I felt the heat rise in my face, my fork clattering onto my plate. My father looked down, shame clouding his eyes. He didn't say a word. And Karen? She leaned back, sipping, her wine like she'd won. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. My voice trembled, but I forced words out. "Karen, that was unnecessary." She feigned innocence. "Oh, sweetheart, I was only joking. Don't be so sensitive. We're all family, here." "Family doesn't humiliate each other," I whispered. Her smile widened. "Oh, but you do that to yourself, Alyssa, by clinging to small dreams, by thinking you're more than you are." The table erupted in laughter again. My chest caved in. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But instead, I sat there, silent, letting the shame wash over me. The worst part wasn't Karen's words. It was Dad's silence. He sat there, his fork trembling slightly in his hand, his gaze fixed on the tablecloth. He didn't defend me. He didn't stop her. For years, he had been my protector, my anchor. But now, weakened by illness and love blind to Karen's cruelty, he let her tear me apart in front of everyone. And in that silence, something inside me broke. Dinner dragged on. Karen laughed, entertained, and basked in the glow of her little performance. The guests played along, some uncomfortable, others enjoying the show. By the time dessert arrived, I could barely taste the food. My humiliation clung to me like smoke, suffocating, impossible to escape. When we finally left, I climbed into my car and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. The tears came hot and fast, blurring the city lights as I sat in the parking lot. Karen had won. She had humiliated me in front of family, friends, and business partners. She had reduced me to nothing. But deep in my chest, beneath the shame, something else stirred. Because what Karen didn't know what none of them knew, was that I wasn't as powerless as I looked. I had a secret. One she would never see coming, and when the time was right, I would use it to bring her to her knees. But first, I had to survive the breaking point. I drove home from that dinner with my hands shaking on the wheel. My father's silence, Karen's laughter, the way everyone else at the table smirked at my expense, it all replayed in my head on a vicious loop. By the time I pulled into my small apartment complex, I could barely breathe. I sat in the car, for almost an hour, tears soaking my cheeks, before I dragged myself upstairs. For the first time in years, I felt utterly, completely alone. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat curled on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor as Karen's voice echoed. Some people should know when to give up. She wanted me to believe I was nothing, that without her approval, or Dad's defense, I was invisible. And for a moment, I believed her. The days that followed blurred together. I went through the motions at work, showing houses with a plastered smile, closing deals with hands that trembled when no one was looking. At night, I'd collapse on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Karen had thrown at me. Wine. Silence was the worst part. My father didn't call. None of my relatives reached out. Not one person who sat at that table thought to check on me after watching Karen tear me apart. It was as if they agreed with her, that I was small, unworthy, destined to stay beneath her heel. I whispered into the empty air, my voice trembling. Am I really that weak? The silence answered me back. At work, my colleague Jenna noticed. She pulled me aside after a showing one afternoon, her eyes soft with concern. Alyssa, what's going on? You're here, but it feels like you're not. I forced a laugh, blinking fast to hide the tears. Just tired, but she didn't buy it. Tired doesn't make you look like your soul's been crushed. Her words almost broke me, because she was right. I felt crushed. That night, I sat in the shower until the water ran cold, hugging my knees, whispering over and over, "She won. She won." But somewhere in that darkness, a small voice began to fight back. I thought about everything Karen had said, about me being nothing, about my dreams being small, about me never been good enough. And then I thought about what she didn't know. She didn't know about the deals I had closed quietly, about the investments I'd made while she was busy flaunting her fake wealth. She didn't know that behind my modest apartment and simple clothes, I was building something real, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. A secret she would never see coming. The next morning, I sat at my tiny kitchen table with a notebook. My hands still shook, but I started to write. I wrote every insult she'd ever thrown at me, every moment of humiliation, every memory of my father looking away instead of defending me. Page after page, I poured out the pain. And when the ink ran dry, I wrote something else. She doesn't get to win. I underlined it 3 times. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt lighter. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, my eyes red and puffy, hair tangled from sleepless nights. For a long moment, I just stared at the woman looking back at me. Then, slowly, I straightened my shoulders. Karen wanted me broken. She wanted me to be silent. But resilience had always been my strength. My father taught me that grit outlives cruelty. And if Karen thought she'd seen the last of me, she was about to learn how wrong she was. Because I wasn't going to stay broken. I was going to rise, quietly, patiently. And when the time was right, I would turn every ounce of pain she gave me into the weapon that destroyed her. The planning had just begun. After that dinner, I knew I couldn't let Karen keep winning. I couldn't erase the humiliation, but I could make sure it never happened again. And I didn't want to just survive her cruelty anymore. I wanted her to feel it, to taste it, to choke on it. The first step was silence. I stopped reacting to her comments, stopped engaging in the back and forth she fed on. If Karen wanted to think she'd broken me, fine, let her. Because while she smirked and strutted, I was building something bigger. For the past 2 years, I'd been working quietly, investing my commissions, buying small properties, flipping them, renting them out. It wasn't flashy, and I never spoke about it at family gatherings. But slowly, it had grown into something real, something powerful, something mine. And at the center of it all stood my biggest secret, a historic mansion I had purchased at a steal, restored piece by piece, and kept completely hidden from everyone, including Karen. But revenge wasn't just about wealth. It was about truth. I began documenting Karen's behavior. Screenshots of texts where she mocked me. Notes of conversations I overheard, her griping about Dad's health, her obsession with his assets, her plans for life, after him. It wasn't evidence for the court. Not yet. But it was a map of her cruelty, proof that I wasn't imagining. Her venom. And I knew, when the time came, her words would betray her more than I ever could. One evening, while reviewing contracts at the office, Jenna leaned over my desk. "You're working like a machine," she said softly. "Still thinking about Karen?" I looked up, surprised. "Always." Jenna tilted her head. "Then don't just think. Act." Her words were like a spark, so I told her everything: the mansion, the investments, the humiliation at the dinner. By the end, her eyes were blazing. "She thinks you're nothing?" Jenna said, furious. "Then show her. Show them all." Her encouragement gave me courage. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. The next family gathering was coming, Karen's birthday dinner. She'd booked the fanciest restaurant in town, invited everyone, and made sure I knew I was expected. Normally, I'd dread it. But this time, I saw an opportunity. What better stage than a room full of family and friends? The same kind of crowd where she'd mocked me before? Only this time, I wouldn't be the one humiliated. This time, the stage would be mine. I kept my plan simple. Step 1. Let Karen humiliate me the way she always did. Step 2. Stay calm, even smile while everyone laughed. Step 3. Drop the truth. The one thing she never expected. I pictured her face when I told them about the mansion, about everything I'd built while she sneered. I pictured the silence that would follow, the way her smirk would crumble in front of the very people she loved to impress. And I knew that was the moment I'd been waiting for. But as the dinner approached, unease crept in. Karen wasn't stupid. Cruel, yes, but not stupid. What if she had her own plan? What if she sensed my confidence, my quiet smirk when she jabbed at me? I reminded myself, resilience, preparation, control. This wasn't about being louder than her. It was about being smarter. The night of her birthday, I stood outside the restaurant in a sleek black dress, my heart pounding like a war drum. Inside, Karen was waiting, with her smirk, her wine glass, her cruel little daggers disguised as jokes. And I? I was ready to turn the blade back on her, but the question was, when the trap snapped shut, would everyone believe me? Or would Karen find a way to twist it all back in her favor? Karen's birthday dinner was everything I expected: lavish, loud, dripping with the kind of fake glamour she craved. The restaurant buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses. Long tables overflowed with relatives, friends, and business associates. At the head of it all sat Karen, glowing in a jewel-toned dress, sipping champagne like a queen on her throne. And then there was me, her favorite target. I'd barely sat down when she struck. "Well, Alyssa," Karen purred, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "So glad you could make it. Did you close a big sale today? Or was it another week of cozy little apartments?" Laughter rippled down the table. My face warmed, but this time, I smiled. Actually, I said calmly, I've been working on something much bigger. You could say it's life-changing. Her smirk faltered just slightly, but she quickly masked it with a laugh. Oh? Do tell. We're all dying to hear. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Not yet. Timing is everything, after all. The thigh. Guests chuckled, intrigued. Karen's eyes narrowed, just for a second. As the evening went on, Karen kept trying. When dessert arrived, she leaned in with another dagger. You know, Alyssa, you should take notes from me. Presentation matters. No one wants to buy a house from someone who looks like they can barely afford one. The table chuckled. My chest tightened, but instead of shrinking, I leaned forward. Funny you say that, Karen, I whispered, voice steady. Because presentation is exactly what I've been working on. Her eyes flicked to mine, suspicion blooming, and for the first time, she didn't laugh. I waited until the waiter brought the cake. Everyone clapped and sang, Karen basking in the attention. When the noise died down, I cleared my throat. Actually have some news, I said, keeping my tone casual. The table quieted. Karen froze with her fork midair. I recently closed on a property, a historic estate actually, over 10,000 square feet. It's been fully restored and, well, let's just say it's a little different from the starter homes you like to joke about. The table erupted in murmurs. My cousin gasped. An uncle raised his brows. Karen's fork clattered onto her plate. What are you talking about? I smiled faintly. A mansion. Mine. For a moment she was speechless. Then she laughed, high and sharp. You expect us to believe that? You of all people? Please, if you had a mansion, we'd know. I tilted my head. Would you? Not everyone flaunts what they have, Karen. The guests chuckled again, but this time the laughter wasn't at me. It was at her. Her face flushed crimson. She reached for her champagne, her hand trembling. The rest of the dinner shifted. Suddenly, relatives who used to pity me leaned closer, asking questions. Where is it? How did you manage that? Can we see it sometime? I answered calmly, keeping details vague, letting their curiosity grow. Karen stayed silent, her smile brittle, her eyes darting. She tried to steer the conversation back to herself, but no one was listening. For the first time, I wasn't the target. She was, and I savored every second. Driving home that night, I gripped the wheel with a steady hand. I'd done it. I'd rattled her. It wasn't a total victory. Not yet. Karen still had power, still had her claws in my father's life and reputation. But for one night, I'd tasted what it felt like to turn the tables. And that taste was addictive. As I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. Enjoy your little game, Alyssa. But remember, I always win. In the end, my stomach tightened. Karen knew. And if she was already striking back, the real battle hadn't even started yet. The text message haunted me. Enjoy your little game, Alyssa. But remember, I always win in the end. Karen wasn't just rattled. She was enraged. And when Karen was enraged, she became dangerous. But what she didn't realize was that I'd been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to push too far. 2 weeks later, she organized another family dinner, this time at Dad's house. He was weak, frail, but Karen insisted the gathering would lift his spirits. I knew better. She wanted another stage. Another chance to humiliate me, to reassert control. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was walking in prepared to end her reign once and for all. The table was set perfectly, candles flickering, crystal glasses gleaming, plates arranged like a magazine spread. Karen floated around in a silk gown, playing hostess, pouring wine, her laughter high and sharp. I sat quietly, waiting. Halfway through the meal, she pounced. "So, Alyssa," she said sweetly, eyes glittering, "why don't you tell everyone more about this so-called mansion of yours? We could all use a good story." The table chuckled. My chest tightened, but this time, not from shame, from anticipation. I placed my fork down gently, folded my hands, and smiled. "It's funny you call it a story," I said, my voice steady, "because I thought the same thing, until I walked through those doors myself." Karen's smile faltered. "What doors?" "The mansion," I said softly. "The one I bought, restored, and now own outright." Murmurs rippled across the table. My aunt gasped. A cousin leaned forward eagerly. Karen's laugh cracked. "That's impossible. You couldn't even afford a car last year." I cut her off, pulling my phone from my purse. "Actually, I thought some of you might like to see it." I tapped the screen, casting the photos onto the TV mounted on the wall. And there it was, the sprawling, white-columned mansion, bathed in golden sunlight, restored gardens, a glittering chandelier in the foyer. Room after room, gleaming with polished wood and marble. The table erupted. Gasps, whispers, exclamations. Karen's face drained of color. "This is fake!" she snapped, her voice trembling. "She's lying. This is some listing photo she stole." I turned the volume up on the video clip playing next. My voice echoed from the screen. "Welcome home." The camera panned as I walked through the front door, waving at the lens. Silence fell. Every pair of eyes turned back to Karen. My father's hand trembled as he set his glass down. "Alyssa, you did this?" I met his eyes and nodded. "Yes, Dad. I've been building it for years." Quietly, while she laughed at me. Karen slammed her hand on the table, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. She's making this up to humiliate me." But her desperation only made the silence heavier. For the first time, the laughter wasn't at me. It was at her. Guests whispered, exchanged looks, shook their heads. My cousin whispered to her husband, "She's been mocking Alyssa for nothing all this time." Another relative muttered, "And here I thought Karen had class." Karen looked around wildly, her mask slipping. Her smirk was gone. Her eyes darted, wide and panicked. I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp enough to cut the air. "You tried to make me small, Karen. You humiliated me in front of my family, mocked my career, and belittled my dreams. But while you were busy tearing me down, I was building this." I tapped the screen one last time. The words, "property deed." Alyssa Morgan filled the screen. My name. My mansion. Undeniable. Karen's glass shattered as it slipped from her trembling hand, my father whispered, tears in his eyes. "I'm proud of you." And in that moment, the balance of power shifted forever. The dinner ended in chaos, relatives buzzing with questions, Karen storming out in humiliation, my father gripping my hand with pride and sorrow. But as I sat alone later that night, the glow of victory still warm in my chest, I couldn't shake one thought. Karen wasn't finished, and the fallout of this night was only beginning. The night after the dinner, I barely slept. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from cousins, uncles, even distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. "Alyssa, is it true? You really own that mansion? I'm so proud of you. Karen never deserved to laugh at you." For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the pitiful girl Karen painted me as. I was the one with the power. Karen, on the other hand, was unraveling. By the next morning, the whispers had already spread beyond family. Friends she used to flaunt her wealth in front of were suddenly questioning her. Neighbors who once admired her silk dresses and manicured lawns now muttered behind her back, I even got a text from one of Dad's business partners. I always thought something was off with Karen. Thank you for showing her true colors. For a woman who lived off appearances, the whispers were worse than any prison sentence. But the moment that mattered most came quietly. Dad asked me to visit. He sat in his armchair, frail, his voice weaker than I remembered, but his eyes, those, were the same. He took my hand. I should have defended you, Alyssa. All those times she cut you down. I should have stopped her. Tears blurred my vision. Dad, you were sick. I didn't want to add to your burden. His hand squeezed mine. No, sweetheart. I let her convince me you were small. But last night, you proved you're stronger than any of us knew. Stronger than me. I pressed my forehead against his hand, my chest aching. That was all I ever wanted, to make him proud. Of course, Karen didn't stay silent for long. 2 days later, she showed up at my apartment. Rain plastered her hair to her face, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the polished queen of family. Dinners. Her voice cracked as she begged. Alyssa, please. You don't understand. You've ruined me. Everyone's laughing. They won't take my calls. I can't live like this. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Now you know how it feels. Her eyes widened, desperate. I was jealous, all right? Your father loved you in ways he never loved me. I couldn't stand it. So I made you small. But I never thought you'd... Her words broke into sobs. Once, those tears would have broken me. Once, I would have rushed to comfort her. But not anymore. Karen, I said coldly, you taught me something valuable. You showed me how it feels to be humiliated. And now, you get to live with that same taste in your mouth every single day. Her sobs followed me as I closed the door. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat in the silence of my tiny apartment. I should have felt elated, victorious. And I did. Partly. But there was something else too. A heaviness. A quiet voice whispering that revenge doesn't erase scars. That no matter how much I'd won, a part of me would always carry the humiliation she caused. Still, I reminded myself, scars aren't weakness. They're proof of survival. And I had survived Karen. In the weeks that followed, the family dynamic shifted. Cousins who once laughed with Karen now reached out to me. Aunts who stayed silent during her cruelty apologized. One uncle even confessed, I always thought she was too sharp with you. But I didn't want to get involved. I should have said something. Their guilt didn't erase the years of silence, but it gave me something Karen never had. Respect. One evening, I stood outside the mansion. My mansion. The golden lights glowed against the night sky, the gardens blooming after years of restoration. And for the first time, I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and let the silence wrap around me. But as I looked out across the marble floors and polished wood, one thought lingered. Owning this house was a victory. But true freedom? That still depended on what I chose to do next. And in that moment, I realized resolution wasn't about Karen at all. It was about me. The night I first stayed in the mansion, I stood in the grand foyer, my footsteps echoing across the marble floors. I dreamed of this moment for years, walking into a place that was truly mine. Not because someone gave it to me, not because I married into it, but because I built it myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Karen didn't disappear overnight. She still hovered around my father, still clung to the scraps of her reputation. But something had shifted permanently. She could no longer cut me down. Not with words, not with laughter. Not with silence, because I no longer cared what she thought. Her power had never been her words. It had been my belief in them. And now, that belief was gone. A month later, Dad's health declined quickly. I sat by his bedside, holding his hand as he whispered, "I'm sorry I let her hurt you." I shook my head, tears spilling down my cheeks. "You gave me everything that mattered, Dad. You gave me grit. And because of that, I'll be okay." He smiled faintly, his eyes soft. "You're more than okay. You're unstoppable." Those were the last words he ever said to me, and I carry them still. After his passing, the family gathered at the mansion for the first time. They walked through the halls, their voices hushed, their eyes wide with awe. "This is incredible, Alyssa," my cousin whispered. "You did this all on your own?" I nodded. All on my own. And in that moment, I wasn't just the girl Karen mocked at dinners. I wasn't the pitiful one, the target, the shadow. I was the woman who rose. Revenge didn't erase the scars. It didn't undo the nights I cried myself to sleep, or the silence of my father when I needed him most. But revenge gave me clarity. It reminded me that I was never powerless, even when she tried to make me feel that way. That resilience is louder than cruelty. That dignity outshines humiliation. And most importantly, it showed me that the best revenge isn't proving someone else wrong. It's proving yourself right. One evening, I stood on the balcony of the mansion, the Charleston skyline glowing in the distance. The breeze lifted my hair, and for the first time in years, I laughed. Not the shaky laugh of someone hiding pain, but the free laugh of someone who had finally taken her life back. Karen could whisper. She could gossip. She could stew in her own bitterness. But me, I had peace. I had strength. I had built a life she could never touch, and that was my freedom. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It truly helps more than you know. Tell me, if someone humiliated you the way Karen humiliated me, would you forgive them? Or would you walk away forever? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't in their downfall. It's in your rise.